Welcome to the Conquer Risk podcast. Today is sort of an interesting episode. We get tons of questions on the podcast, and so we decided to do a podcast about a podcast. And so that's what today's kind of fun flavor will be. What do you got, Jeff?
Yeah, well, ultimately, that's one of the things that we ran into. We mentioned on the last podcast, but when we do a conference or we're doing a client event, this is one of the most common questions, right? Which is funny, and that's okay because the whole reason for our podcast, is helping folks. So let's talk about why we do it, kind of how we do it, what some of the struggles are, those kinds of things. And frankly, you and I have made a shit ton of mistakes. So
let's start with the why. Start with the why. I mean, historically, Potomac, from a content perspective, we put out a monthly commentary for years. And as we've evolved, we've done different things, whether they're presentations or blogs. And it's always been sort of a presentation format, a written format. And some people struggle with that. You and I struggle with that sometimes. It takes a long time. You get writer's block. But we're fine having these conversations, and we have these conversations with advisors all day long. And you and I have conversations with each other all day long about topics in the industry, good stuff, bad stuff, bitching about things we see. And so it was really, let's take a step back. If we can just record our conversations to each other, obviously in a more structured format, there'll be tons of content that we can come back and look at, come back and hear or watch. And so that was the genesis behind it. Let's get content in a format that you and I and other folks at Potomac can easily produce. And then obviously it's better to distribute it, right? Like you said the other day where someone's like, listen, I'm driving to a conference. I don't have time to read anything, but it's cool. I can just play this on my phone in my car or whatever it may be.
Right. Well, and that's, that makes a lot of sense, and of course, I laugh when you say, well, we put it in a structured format. It's just kind of structured. we sort of do good at that.
it's I guess what I mean is it's not just us hitting record on a random conversation because we would, that wouldn't be very, very good to record. So it would have to be explicit language only. So
true that.
All right, so that's the reasoning, the why behind it. But why don't you touch on the concept of it? Like, we tossed around different ideas, but what's the ultimate concept of this podcast?
Yeah, so it's a good question. I mean, ultimately, the concept of our podcast and what we think everybody should do if they're going to do one of these is to ultimately pick a niche. I mean, granted, I guess there are people who make what I'll call the random podcast, which is Lord only knows. That's what Howard Stern was for. Who knows what he's going to come up with, right? That's a radio show. But from a podcasting standpoint, we felt it important that we pick a niche. And for us, it's very simple. Help advisors grow. What can we do, whether it be from our experience, from what we learn, et cetera, that we can help advisors grow? So a good point of this was, and again, a time when podcasting came up, is our recent podcast about a month ago when you went to the WealthStack conference. Right. One of the things you mentioned there was there was someone who was an expert in podcasting, and so you were getting some feedback from him, and just the concept of helping others in that space. So if advisors who are listening or watching want to know how to do a podcast, well, we're trying to point out some of the really obvious things, the simple mistakes that we've made. We're going to give you a list later of equipment and touch on some of those kinds of items. So that's really it. It's about the concept is how do we help advisors grow? That's our concept. Obviously, each advisor would want to pick their own niche.
And also to add on that, it could be something that we're just giving our take on that might be valuable for someone in their practice. We don't know that, right? We're coming at this as, look, our audience, they're advisors. You and I have grown up in this business working with advisors. So whatever knowledge we can sort of spit on record and camera or whatever it may be, it could be helpful for someone in the audience.
Yeah, and ultimately, through the process of listening and watching about the things that we're talking about, from you and I, you're going to get to know us. I think, if you've watched a couple of these, you pretty well get a feel of who we are as people and owners. And the cool part is this isn't about our product, right? we're not getting online and saying, well, we've got the greatest performance on the planet and that sort of thing.
It also can't be, right? I mean, to be fair, right? That's one thing that advisors have to keep in mind is from a compliance point of view. There's certain things you have to avoid, but we can touch on that.
Right. So let's jump into something else. I mean, why don't we touch on some of the struggles and frankly, dumbass mistakes that you and I have made through the process?
Well, the biggest struggle was because of the format. So we decided on the format ahead of researching anything, right? We said, look, we want to record our conversations both in video and audio format, and then have that video play with both of us on the screen. And little did we know that format is a huge struggle, right? Number one is neither of us are in the same location. We're both remote. Right. So that right then and there knocks out any film crew coming in, right? So we had to make sure that we set it up where we could record and in remote locations. And also, you don't want to throw money at a problem, before it's a problem. The goal was, let's do this as quickly and inexpensively as possible and not have to bring in huge production, right? We wanted to prove that we could do this on our own with a limited budget. And so we had to use some of the tools we had. So some of the major struggles was finding a microphone that worked, the settings on the microphone, for fuck's sakes. I mean, how many different gain and input settings have we screwed up? Yeah. Lighting, having enough shirts in the closet, which I always go to YouTube and make sure I'm not wearing the same one I wore last week.
Yeah.
But what about you? What are the biggest struggles that came to mind?
Yeah, well, definitely. We try and at least rotate shirts. I mean, let's face the reality, right? I live in an RV full time, so I'm not, unless I'm doing a client event, I'm not seeing anybody. I'm in a T-shirt and basketball shorts, right? So I try and at least change that up a bit for the podcast occasionally. Here's the most recent struggle that I had was we moved locations, right? So I had everything boxed up. We get here, set everything up, and it's the first time that I've seen this happen. I have an interface between the microphone and the computer, right? And all the lights on the front are on. No big deal. Never had a problem with this device, except I started doing a test recording about 5 minutes before our podcast time, and the microphone wouldn't work. And I'm checking I'm checking the laptop system. I'm checking the ports that it's plugged into to make sure it didn't come loose. I spent 5 to 10 minutes just trying to figure this out, and it turns out there's a power switch for the microphone lead itself, right? This little thing that needed to be on. I've never seen it turned off. It was on when I pulled it out of the box. So the box can have power, but the switch on the back needed to be turned on. There was 10 minutes of my life wasted, right? I mean, that's that kind of thing. So definitely
struggles are like, all right, the microphone, lighting,
yeah,
and finding software that works well with each other, right? And that's been a big struggle for both of us.
Right. So one of the things that happened that was kind of a big deal is we tried a couple of different webcams. We've settled on one, the Logitech 920. We're both using it. But ultimately, the software that comes with it, I've now got a new laptop so that I can run some of this. I mean, software was probably the biggest struggle, and so it's like chicken or the egg, right? What's first? The camera that works, the microphone that works, the software that melds everything together, right? Which is it? And ultimately, you just keep making adjustments along the way. And we've spent more than what we now, if we went and did it again, than what we would have to do. But that's the way life works, right? We're getting ready to do another upgrade on something anyway, so it happens. But we can get started.
So if you record on your own and you do it only for audio and no video, you don't need anything. You just need your iPhone. There's a couple apps that'll just record it. You upload it. You're done. However, if you want to introduce video, then you need someone to edit. To splice together the audio and the video file. There's different things that you'll see. That happen when you add video. And with that being said, if it's such a struggle to add video, one would think, why would you even bother adding video?
Because we're stupid and we like painful processes.
Yeah.
So the primary reason that we wanted to make sure that we started this right out of the gate with video was that there's a couple of studies reports that I had come across in doing our research, right? I mean, you and I were already doing some individual videos, right? So I think that's important to understand first. We were already getting comfortable with that space. But also LinkedIn. Now, granted, this is a 2017 report, but even they were giving information like, look, they've got 500 million users, and 74% of the video that is working within their system is video, or is video. The content is video. I mean, it's going that way, right? 74% of the content that is being utilized is video moving forward. So if those are the kinds of projections, why would we want to sit back and just continue to do a podcast by itself with no video? And I don't know about you, but I'm slightly ADHD. Listening to something doesn't get my attention near as much as watching it. If I'm watching it and listening to it, then it drags in more. Now, there's another step.
Well,
go ahead.
I just want to touch on that. So it's not just, that's a great stat, but our own stats, right? I mean, we've posted videos side by side with links to blogs or just links to articles, and the engagement is 20, 30, sometimes 50 times higher.
Right.
And so it's, the stats are all out there that video engagement is through the roof, but we got to see it, firsthand with our own posting. And it's almost now to the point where you might as well not do anything unless it is a video.
Right. Well, it's a good point. I mean, even this morning I had someone that I knew, but I just a friend who's in the business that reached out to me. I haven't talked to him in a year or two, and he saw our video with Alex Chalekian, the interview that you did. And there was a checklist that was spoken about, and so he asked about the checklist. Right? Now, if he wouldn't have seen the video, he would have never known to ask about this checklist from a succession planning standpoint, right? He wasn't listening to our podcasts. He was watching them.
Yeah.
Right? So anyway, that's one piece. Another one is Aberdeen Group came out a couple of years ago with a study that said, those brand marketing that utilizes video is 49% higher ROI than those that don't. So if we're going to market our brand, and this is part of the process, right? This is just one of the many things that we do. Well, let's get video in it, because you and I will then we can make snippets, little short pieces out of this, and post them on LinkedIn and some other places, Twitter and what have you, right? Just to get some additional engagement, let people know about this if they're not already connected to it.
But also on the workflow stuff, like we're working on video workflows with Wistia and HubSpot, where if someone requests information, since video is more engaging, send them a video about the topic.
Right.
And so you have to commit to it. You can't just make one. What we see in this space is advisors making one intro video, with the fancy music, and we serve the clients with the utmost blah blah blah. Those videos. They put them on their website and then they're done.
Right.
That's just not how it works. Like it's constant engagement. You got to put snippets out there, talk about current topics. Anyway, you get the drill. So, anything else on video before we move forward?
Yeah, I think I don't think so on why we use video. I think that's pretty explanatory. Look, it's better engagement. That's the reality.
Okay.
So.
Yep.
Yeah.
So what kind of equipment did we settle in on? I know you had a hand in sort of picking all this stuff.
Yeah. So this is where hopefully we can save some advisors time, right? And that's part of helping advisors grow. So if going down the road of a podcast or a video podcast is helpful, I'm going to put all the links for our equipment in our show notes, so that we're not going to take another 20 minutes and go through each and every one of them. The reality is, I probably spent 10 or 15 hours watching different videos myself, right, as well as doing other kinds of research to see what tools we can use to put something together on a relatively low budget. Because again, like you mentioned, we don't want to spend a whole bunch of money on a problem that isn't necessarily a big problem yet. So my estimate is about $300 per person would get a video podcast up and running if you use the tools that we are already using. And believe me, I mean, I've gone through about 15 different iterations of software to settle on what we're using. Those kinds of things. It saves you time if you just use the list that we've got.
Yeah, and frankly, if you have editing skills, even basic editing skills, you can just use your iPhone and some good lighting.
Right.
Now, yes, if you want to get a mic and a recorder, and if you want to take it a little further, there's different things you need, but that shouldn't be an excuse, because
Right.
Everyone has a smartphone. You can get a Rode mic or a lav mic for $20.
Right.
If you don't have a lighting kit, I think mine was $50, and we'll put this all in the show notes. you just get natural light. There's ways around it. The point is you just have to have that want behind it.
Right. And all of our individual videos that we have done have been with our iPhones and an Amazon $15, $20 lavalier mic. Right? So,
Correct.
I mean, it's pretty simple.
Yeah.
And then we used a transcript software that rotates through the phone screen while you're talking so that, you're actually just reading, but you're looking right at the phone. And obviously, you just work on your script, and it's really, really simple. And you have a workable video right out of the gate, unless you want to do a little bit of editing. So,
yeah,
it's not that terribly complicated. It's just a matter of, but it's not terribly complicated, but it is overwhelming, right? It is overwhelming. So little by little, that's the deal, though. But hopefully we'll save you some time by giving you the list.
Yeah. All right, well, let's talk about analytics then, sort of what our experience has been so far. I think
right.
We've sort of chosen to not pay attention too much to analytics because at first it can be skewed when it comes to downloads and views, and you're going on these different platforms from Spotify to Apple. So using Pippa, we have a peek in, and we're averaging about 50 to 80 downloads, I think, per session, give or take, or views. I don't even know, honestly, how they separate that. But that's fine with us because think about it. Let's say you average 100 views a week over time. Some people in the podcast game would think that's a huge disappointment. But I don't. That's 100 people who are listening to your message on a weekly basis. If I came to you and said, hey, do you want to do a meeting with 100 advisors? The answer would be yes, right? It's no different. If you can get a group of people who are followers and who want to listen to your message, ultimately that's the analytics that counts.
Right.
And so we haven't dove in. We said after 6 months or a year, we'll dive in some more and really start breaking it down. But you can't get caught up in it because, it could bum you out, right? When you go in there and you do all this work and you get 5 people to watch it or listen to it. So that's our plan has been, listen, let's look at it as 6 months, which is, I guess, coming up here in a couple months, and then look at a year and kind of see where we're at.
Yeah, well, another component of that is, we distribute this information in several different ways and locations, right? LinkedIn, Twitter, and all those kinds of things, as well as it's on Pippa, it's on our website, right? So it's also a matter of looking to analyze, well, where are we getting, and through some email as well, where are we getting the most traction, right? And that's part of the learning curve that every single advisor will have to go through, because ultimately, if you don't have all these social media platforms and you just have a basic website that you're trying to distribute this through, look, how many people are looking at your website? I mean, you're probably going to have to do something else to help motivate people to watch it and get it out there. Because, again, if it's only getting in front of 5 people, you only have the odds of a maximum 5 people watching it. At least if you get it out there.
That's probably a separate, that's
right.
Like a separate podcast in terms of distribution.
Sure.
Like this goes back to all of it, like we talked about. You can't just post one thing and
right.
move on.
But, yeah, absolutely.
But it's, what? Even if you just record your thoughts over time, it's still a value, right?
Yeah. Well,
so
this is something I think is important, though, and you're hitting on it, and that is, even if you don't distribute it, I highly recommend that you take time and set up, even if it's just an iPhone on a tripod, record yourself addressing different subjects. It's amazing how many times you'll find your own little tick or your own issue, or you watch it back and go, wait a minute, that made no sense whatsoever. Now, if I just answered the question and it made no sense when I watched it back, clearly you need to work on it. So it's a good learning opportunity, even if you're just learning it for yourself. So, food for thought.
Yep, cool. What recommendations do you have?
All right, mine is a little different than before. I'm actually going to link in the show notes a recipe for a breakfast dip that I think is absolutely phenomenal. So the short story is, I was at a Grand Design RV rally last week, and there was a dip contest. And so you get 5 tickets. You can try all these different dips, and you put one ticket in each one of them that you liked. Right? There's going to be a winner. Well, I tried one dip, and it was okay, and I put my ticket in. And then I tried this dip that I'm going to share the recipe. I put all 4 tickets in there. I just kept going back and getting more. It's really good. So it's basically, some Rotel, some Velveeta, but what got me some breakfast sausage, which was definitely different, and a little spice to it. But then it also had a can of ginger ale. Never heard about using pop, for a thinner on something like that. But it definitely gave it a different twang. It's pretty darn good. And all I could think about the whole time was, I need to be watching a football game. I need to be watching a football game, right? So anyway, 11 o'clock in the morning, I got to be watching a football game and eating more of this stuff. So
cool,
what do you got?
Cool. My recommendation for the week, I guess, is I got this book at the Riskalyze conference from a guy named Horsch, who's the CEO of Ritz-Carlton, I think. I'm about halfway through it. So far, it's a pretty cool story. I mean, the guy started, his first job was working in hotels. That's what he always wanted to do. He told his parents, I want to work in hotels. And he started in the kitchen and then busing and sort of worked his way up and learned the luxury side of the business, and is now sort of in charge of all the Ritz-Carlton brand across the country. So it's a good story. It's a good story on customer service, how to deliver it, and his background. So, I start a book with gusto to finish it in a couple of days, and it's still on my nightstand. I'm halfway through, so hopefully I get it done in the next week or so.
Apparently your brain is easier to decode than Bill Gates.
I'm not a CEO because they average 15 books a day apparently, and they have no kids, lives, or payroll either. Yeah. Just reading books. So.
All right,
cool.
Well, on that note, let's sum this up. Right, like, subscribe. If you have a comment, you can go out to the www.potomacfund.com and choose Connect, and drop us a comment, whether that be a new idea or a reference to something that we've already done. All right, thanks a lot. We'll catch you next time. Peace.
Thanks. Bye.